In this part of the lesson, we're going to be blocking in our shadow shapes, the background, and re-elaborating on some of the contours we made in the previous stage. Like earlier, I'm starting in the lower left-hand corner, my only aim being to lay down as much graphite as I can to form a base value for the background. As I do, I pay careful attention to the shapes in the foreground. I want these shapes to continuously improve even if my focus for the time being is on the background. At this juncture, I like to go back and redefine some of the shapes from our outline stage. No doubt some of our contours have been lost in the haze of value, so in order for us to preserve the integrity of our shapes, it's worth the effort to go back and make the adjustments. In your mind, think of this as a kind of trial run. You're building up your drawing, staring deeper into your subject, grasping what elements of it capture your imagination, and on a more practical level, analyzing the shapes, the values, and the edges that will make your drawing jump out of the page. We're just about done with blocking in our values. In this video, we learned some techniques on how to build up our background efficiently. We delineated simply our values into a light and a shadow family and redesigned some of the shapes. That's all for this lesson. Catch you in the next one. As I make my way into the shadow of the left orange, I begin by establishing the value of the core shadow, keying it to the value of the background. Once I'm happy with the value in that area, I progress to the part of the shadow receiving the most reflected light. Because of the ambient light in that area, it's going to be lighter than the core shadow, but only slightly. If you squint your eyes, the difference should be barely perceptible. So when in doubt, err on the side of making the reflected light too dark. I'm also adjusting the value and shape of the cast shadow and softening the transition between it and the form shadow by shading in an intermediate value. With all aspects of the drawing, I like to first work on the shapes in an area, then the values, and finally the edges. I do it in this order because the shape is in a sense the environment that the other elements live in. The value gives us information on how the light interacts with the form, and the edges tell us how slowly or sharply these forms are turning. At this stage of the drawing, it becomes apparent the similarities between our exercise on rendering 3D geometric objects and what we are doing here. Visualize this orange as a slightly more complex sphere and apply those same principles of unity of value, light and shadow separation, and soft but specific gradations in value from your darkest halftones to your lightest. In defining the form shadow of the right orange, I start by building up the value the core shadow, getting it to its correct value before transitioning into the reflected light and making adjustments to the cast shadow. In order for the form of this orange to look realistic, our values must be even and our transitions soft and subtle. Even values achieved through the application of multiple layers of graphite and the removal of spots of inconsistent values that inevitably arise. Soft transitions, on the other hand, come from an effective use of the right pencil in the right area with the right intermediate value to bridge the gap between disparate tones. Picking up right where we left off, I'm continuing to build up the shadow in the right leaf. This particular section slightly lighter than the values above it. Keep your eyes fixed as well on the sliver of light beside the shadow, moving from darker to lighter, from top to bottom. The value of this part of the stalk of the right orange is similar to that of the core shadow, with most of its edges soft and diffuse because of the intensity of the light around it. The planes on the right hand side of the stalk is facing more towards the light and is considerably lighter with harder edges surrounding it. Over in this section, I've decided to start with the darkest planes, establishing that as a base and gradating the values lighter towards the top and the bottom of the leaf. As light as this portion of the leaf appears when stared into, it is still noticeably lighter than the local value of this part of the orange. For our values to synchronize harmoniously, comparisons of this nature must be recurrent through the entire drawing process. Not just for our values, but for our edges as well. At this juncture, most of our efforts will be devoted to the background. Many layers, deft use of our paintbrush and some tissue paper will help us in achieving a cohesive and unified background. This drawing is more or less a sketch, so if you want to leave your drawing as it was prior, that's totally fine. To be honest, I think I prefer the background with the whites of the paper showing. We are to grow as artists, we must learn to enjoy and appreciate the more monotonous aspects of creating a picture. Whether it's working on a background such as this, or engaging in a rigorous self-critique afterwards, it is only in those moments of discomfort that we strengthen our weaknesses and elevate our abilities. As we draw near to the end of this project, I advise you to give it a day when you feel like you're done and come back with fresh eyes, devoid of the angst of hurrying to the end, and fix whatever calls your attention as in need of improvement. With that said, congratulations for making it this far. I've tried my best to make this class as informative as I could, and my hope is that some of you were able to increase your understanding and leave with a bit more motivation to try a little harder. I would appreciate any feedback on how I can make these classes better for you guys, but until then, take care and much love.